Hi, thank you for joining me on another episode of the Tech Exec Podcast, where I'll help you create teams worth leading, because life's too short to lead mediocre teams. As always, I'm your host, Aviv Ben-Yosef, advisor and coach to tech execs worldwide, and our subject today is cognitive dissonances. I got to this because I was suffering from a couple of these and realized that I'm seeing this concept arise a lot in conversations, and that when I name it in front of people, it actually helps a lot of people realize that they're doing things that suffer from this sort of dissonance. When we talk about cognitive dissonance, it's about being in a position where we have two contrasting things happen in our minds. We might say that we value X, whereas our actions show that we do Y. And when we have the cognitive dissonance, it is oftentimes problematic, especially when it comes to how we create an organization, how we cultivate the right culture. Personally, when it comes to yourself one-on-one, a lot of people, there's some old quote about intelligence, meaning you can hold two contrasting opinions in your mind at the same time, and that's some sort of dissonance. And I agree, sometimes we need to be able to entertain some dissonance because it helps us spot the gradients in life when things aren't black and white, but where we need to learn to find exactly the right move, to be okay with some vagueness and with some uncertainty. That's life. After all, as much as I like digital stuff, the real world is quite analog. When it comes to your role as a senior leader and how you're making other people understand what you're doing, when it comes to instilling purpose, creating an organization that actually gets better, improves as things grow, which usually, entropy, things become more complex. So if you want to have an organization that grows without losing it, you have to learn how to minimize cognitive dissonance in a way that prevents it from stopping others, from understanding, from being on the same page with you, and creating space for autonomy. If we have a lot of these dissonances, people cannot be autonomous because it's very hard to discern what exactly am I supposed to do, because if we're always seeing contrasting things, how can I pick? You, within your mind, might have the priorities laid out. You might understand precisely why, in this case, you choose this over that, but this usually is not that clear to people throughout your organization. Hopefully it's clearer to people who report directly to you, but as you keep going down the org chart, it just becomes more diluted when it comes to the message, and the dissonance becomes more and more potent. So just a few quick examples that I recently saw. One was like the example I gave earlier, people talking about this is something that we value, this is critical for us when it comes to stuff like company value. Let's talk about work-life balance, or let's talk about how we want to treat our people. And yet, the CEO repeatedly has people work long hours, be burned out just because of deadlines the CEO kept agreeing to. And I'm not even talking about whether those deadlines by themselves are problematic or not. I'm talking about the dissonance. People see one thing, hear one thing, and then see how the company is treating them. And for them, this is very, very confusing, even for people who aren't necessarily that bothered by having to work long hours, by having this extra stress. The dissonance makes things worse. So that's one real example that we have to tackle. Another example is when you're looking at how you're treating your people when it comes to giving them autonomy, when it comes to coaching them and helping them grow. But if you're telling people that you want to create an autonomous team with a lot of delegation and where people can do what they need, and yet you always assign tasks that are so tight, always so stretchy goals, so we cannot make a single misstep, because then we'll surely miss our deadlines, we'll surely miss our goals. Whenever those things happen, you're again sending these mixed messages, mixed signals. People don't really understand, should I care about having the time to try things out, to using our brilliance, to having autonomy, to being able to work on my own and find the solution? Or do I have to always approve every little thing and run it by the management, because otherwise we're going to get lost, we're going to be yelled at, we're going to do something wrong? These things don't hold up, and when you have them both for a while without ever addressing the cognitive dissonance, without arming the leaders in your organization with some tools to help them explain to others what's happening, why you're prioritizing this over that, how they need to act, what's important, without addressing this, you're essentially telling people, who knows, just do whatever, and we're trying to wing it. That's not how we create teams that become better as they grow, that gain more autonomy, that allow you to always get even more altitude as a leader in the organization, because you can disengage from a lot of the tactics as the organization grows and matures and look at things with better vision. If you always control an organization that has all this dissonance, you don't just control it as in you're there and you tell them what to do. You cannot really disengage, because the dissonance makes it impossible for people to learn the operating system, the values, the principles that they need to use in order to make decisions on their own. All this to say that if you find yourself having to repeat things and keep saying stuff like, yeah, I know I said that, but here, or in this case or in that case, and you're not addressing things systematically, you're always winging it, your modus operandi is just a bunch of patches that you're just slapping on every time to do whatever makes sense right now, without understanding that sometimes we need to provide people with some tools, with some principles. Then you're probably carrying a lot of these dissonances that just become much worse once it leaves your head, leaves the senior management room, and starts roaming in the organization. So I want you to think about that, okay? And I'm sure you can do better. And if not, I can help you do better. That's it for this week. By the way, before logging off, did you check Unplugged with Aviv? It's a new offering I've got that's essentially at least once a month live session with me, where I share a bunch of stuff that I've seen, and we can talk about things. You can send me questions in advance. We can have questions live. I'm trying to do something that's a lot more in connection with what people are going through in the day-to-day. And right now it has ridiculous introductory prices. So do check that out. The link will be in the show notes. And other than that, I'm always here. If you have any questions, any comments, check out my email in the show notes, check out the newsletter in the show notes, and I'll be here next week. Ciao.